The December wind didn't just blow across Kansas. It punished it. It scraped over the plains like sandpaper, spinning snow into small white tornadoes that danced across dead fields. The sky was hard and gray, the kind of winter sky that didn't promise anything except more cold. And in the middle of that frozen emptiness, Thomas Sheldon lay flat on his stomach beside an old dry well, his gloved fingers pressed against the rough wood cover. He waited. Not for the weather to change. Not for the sun to rise. He waited for silence. A mile away, the bank-owned farmhouse sat like a corpse. No smoke. No lights. Just a dark shape in a sea of snow. But Thomas didn't trust quiet. Quiet was often a trick. Behind him, Emma Sheldon held Lily close under a threadbare shawl. Noah stood with his shoulders tense, staring into the distance like he expected someone to appear at any moment. Thomas lifted the well cover just 2 inches, barely enough to see the road. His breath rose in white clouds. Then he whispered the words that decided whether they lived another day. Clear. Emma nodded, and together they eased the cover open. Inside the well mouth, darkness waited like a throat. Lily's lantern flickered. And Thomas began lowering his child into the earth. Lily didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked at her mother, and her little voice shook. Mom. It's so dark down there. Emma forced a smile even though her heart felt like it was cracking. I know, baby, she said softly. But you hold the light. And you keep it close. Okay? Thomas tied the rope around Lily carefully, twice, then checked it a third time, like checking it could silence his fear. Noah held the rope steady, his hands stiff and red from the cold. Lily's boots touched the stone lining of the well, and slowly, her lantern glow drifted downward, shrinking as the earth swallowed it. Like a star falling into a grave. Emma watched until the light disappeared completely. Then Thomas lowered his voice, like the land itself could hear. No riders on the road. No lanterns. No footsteps. He signaled. Noah climbed down next. Then Emma. Then Thomas, last. When the cover slid back into place, the world above became nothing. The bank could have their house. They could have their barn. They could have their fields. But the Sheldons still had something the bank couldn't seize. Each other. In the hidden refuge that Thomas had carved from stone with his own hands. 4 months earlier, late August, the Kansas heat had still clung to the ground like a fever. Thomas came back from town with no groceries. No tools. No smile. Emma knew something was wrong the moment she saw his face. What happened? She asked. Thomas didn't answer right away. He set his hat on the table. His hands were shaking. Then he said, "They're calling loans." Emma felt the air leave her chest. The bank had been patient, at least it pretended to be. But after 2 seasons of crop failure, everyone in the county was behind. And banks didn't forgive. Banks collected. Who? Emma asked, even though she already knew. Thomas's jaw tightened. Hutchins. Mr. Hutchins was the type of man who wore his cruelty like clean clothes. He smiled while he ruined you. He'd stared at Thomas like Thomas was a stain on a ledger. He gave me until winter, Thomas said quietly. Then he takes everything. Emma gripped the edge of the table. No. There has to be something we can do. Thomas looked toward the bedroom where Noah and Lily were sleeping. His voice broke just slightly. I already begged. That night, Thomas paced the floor until the oil lamp burned low. Emma sat with her hands folded like prayer didn't feel strong enough. Finally, Thomas stopped and said something that sounded insane. The dry well. Emma blinked. What? The old well. The one that went dry years ago. Emma stared like she didn't understand language anymore. Thomas. We can't live in a hole. Thomas leaned close, eyes burning with a desperate kind of focus. We can't live in the snow either. That well wasn't just a well. It was a secret. Years ago, when it stopped producing water, Thomas had climbed down to inspect it. And at the base, where the stone lining met bedrock, he'd found something strange. A natural limestone cavity. A pocket of space inside the earth, like nature had started building a room. He told Emma everything that night. How big? She asked, voice tight. Small, he admitted. But it's there. And it can be expanded. Emma shook her head in disbelief. How would we breathe? How would we cook? How would we live? Thomas didn't pretend it was easy. He just said, I was a miner before I was a farmer. He held her gaze. I know stone. I know tunnels. I know how to keep a roof from collapsing. Emma swallowed. And you think we can hide? Underground? For an entire winter? Thomas's voice was low. I think it's the only way we keep the kids alive. That sentence ended the argument. Because when a mother hears the words keep the kids alive, logic becomes less important than survival. They had 14 weeks before winter. 14 weeks before the bank deadline. 14 weeks to disappear. Without leaving the county. They worked in secret, like criminals. At night, they lowered supplies down the well. Planks. Rope. Nails. Tools. Food sacks. Thomas and Noah moved like shadows. Emma carried supplies and watched the road. Even Lily helped, holding the lantern and whispering questions that made Emma's heart ache. Are we playing hide and seek? Emma kissed her forehead and said, Yes, sweetheart. The biggest hide and seek ever. At the bottom, Thomas began digging. The limestone fought him, hard, stubborn, cold. But Thomas fought harder. He followed the seam and carved it deeper. A cave became a chamber. Then a chamber became a home. He reinforced the walls with salvaged timber from the old barn. He stacked fieldstone and sealed it with clay mixed with dry grass. He built a ceiling of overlapping planks, then layered it with waterproof canvas, stones, and packed earth to muffle sound. Emma watched him and realized something. This wasn't just a shelter. It was a father's refusal to let his family be erased. When it was done, the room was about 15 feet long, 12 feet wide, and just high enough for Thomas to stand without bending. Bunks lined one wall. A small corner served as storage. And the well shaft became their only entrance, their only air, and their biggest risk. Heat was life. Smoke was death. Thomas traded his last silver pocket watch for a tiny cast-iron stove. It was built for wagons and camps, not homes. But it could burn wood hot enough to keep them alive. Then came the biggest challenge, the stovepipe. A straight pipe out the well would be visible from miles away. So Thomas built a hidden smoke channel inside the well wall, tight, careful, angled. Smoke rose behind stone, released higher up where it blended into the cold air. And they burned only the driest wood. Only at night. Only when the wind was strong enough to hide the faintest breath of smoke. Emma hated every moment of it. But hate didn't matter. Only survival did. By early December, the bank deadline hit. The Sheldons vanished. Hutchins and his men searched. The farmhouse was seized. A bankman moved in for a few weeks, lighting the stove in their kitchen, sleeping in their bed, drinking coffee at their table. Thomas watched it from the well mouth some nights, rage shaking his chest like thunder. Emma had to grip his wrist and whisper, Not now. You get caught, we die. Inside the underground home, time turned strange. No sunrise. No sunset. Only routines Emma enforced like law. Morning. Heat water. Wash faces. Ration breakfast. Midday. Lessons for Lily. Tasks for Noah. Repairs and planning for Thomas. Night. Supper. Quiet talk. Sleep. The food was simple, beans, dried meat, roots stored in sand. Once a week, Emma baked a small bread loaf on the coldest day to reduce smoke risk. That smell. Warm bread in a cold underground room. It made Lily smile. And it made Emma cry quietly when nobody was looking. Because it reminded her of the home they lost. The hardest part wasn't hunger. It wasn't cold. It was fear. Fear that someone would hear them. Fear that someone would notice the well cover move slightly. Fear that Noah would sneeze too loud. Fear that Lily would laugh at the wrong time. Some nights they heard footsteps above. Just passing. But each time it happened, Emma's blood turned to ice. And Thomas would sit, rifle nearby, listening so hard it felt like his ears would bleed. Noah tried to act brave, but Emma saw the truth. He was 15, still a kid, forced into a man's terror. Lily had nightmares. She would wake up whispering, "They found us. They found us. Emma would hold her tight and lie softly. No, baby. We're safe. But sometimes Emma wasn't sure she believed it. Late January brought the worst cold. One night the stove began coughing smoke into the room. Emma froze. Noah jumped up. Dad! Thomas moved instantly. He climbed the ladder into the shaft and felt it. Ice blocking airflow. If he didn't clear it, smoke would fill the chamber. And they would suffocate, quietly, completely, with no one above even knowing. Thomas climbed out into the freezing night and chipped at the ice with a chisel. Wind slapped him like a whip. His hands went numb. His lungs burned. He worked until he could barely stand. Then the blockage broke. Air flowed again. Thomas climbed back down, shaking, covered in frost, and sat on the floor. Emma touched his shoulder. He whispered, "That was too close." Noah stared at him with new eyes. Not just as a father. As a man who had just wrestled death with bare hands. Then February arrived. And something shifted. The air above softened just slightly. Snow didn't feel like knives anymore, more like tired cold. One evening Thomas returned from his well check with a look Emma hadn't seen in months. "Snow is melting a little," he said. Emma exhaled, like she had been holding her breath all winter. "We're going to make it," she whispered. Lily asked, "So we don't stay underground forever?" Thomas crouched to her level. "No, little bird. This is our winter sleep. When the world wakes up, we wake up too." By early March, water pooled near the well mouth. The ground was thawing. Thomas gathered them. "A few more weeks," he said. "Then we leave before anyone expects it." They packed only what mattered. Blankets, tools, food, and one small wooden doll Thomas had carved for Lily during quiet nights. Before dawn, they climbed out one by one. The sky was gray-blue. The air smelled like wet soil. Like life returning. They stood beside the well, thinner, tougher, changed. Emma looked at Thomas and said, "We went down scared." Thomas looked at his children. "And we're coming out strong." Noah asked, "Where do we go now?" Thomas pointed west. "Toward a place that can't own us. Because we won't belong to anyone again." They walked away as the sun rose behind them. And the well sat silent. Just an abandoned dry well. With a secret only the Sheldon family would ever truly understand. Sometimes survival isn't about winning. It's about refusing to disappear. Even when the world tries to bury you. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more emotional survival and life lesson stories. And comment below, what would you do if you lost everything overnight?